What is up, Watch fam? Happy Wednesday, and welcome to this week's episode of In the Metal / Value in Vintage Watches. I am Christian from Theo and Harris, and I've got three awesome, really interesting vintage pieces here for you today. So let's get into it. Alright guys, I am excited to be back on In the Metal. This was one of our first series. Basically, I take a few minutes out of my day, I pick out some watches from the Theo and Harris watch shop, I sit down, and I tell you why I love them. So, up first, we have a Polerouter by Universal Geneve, a watch that is very collected in collector's circles, really popular within people that are in the vintage watch business, but not something that most people, most people on the street know anything about. It was introduced in 1954 by company Universal Geneve. The company has since gone defunct. They no longer make watches, but at the time, Universal Geneve was a manufacturer of watches that were quite impressive and collectible and praised by collectors that also were buying watches from Audemars Piguet and Patek Philippe. It was this watch, though, like I said, in 1954, that gave the start of a career to someone who would go on to do some pretty incredible things. The gentleman's name was Gerald Genta. He was 23 years old when Universal Geneve gave him the tap to begin designing something. Their only instruction was for this watch to be uncomplicated and to serve as a proper kind of commemorative piece for Scandinavian airline systems, successfully completing the pole route flight right over the North Pole. Pretty cool. But that's just the background, and while history is incredible and it's quite possibly what takes this watch or any watch from good to great in many instances, it's not the only thing the Polerouter has going for it. In fact, this watch in the metal is just as good as it is in story and in history. You've got very distinctive, well-defined, thick steel lugs here. They're twisted in design, something that was popularized by Omega's Speedmaster quite a few years later. Universal Geneve did not invent the idea of twisting lugs, but the Polerouter is definitely at kind of the foundation of that design in the vintage world. Beyond its case, you've got a crosshair dial, you've got Dauphine hands, you have a beautiful reflective inner ring, and a date, and an original crown as well, which is quite rare to find. This particular example, though, does cause quite a bit of controversy because of the condition of its dial. The dial is patinated. It is technically damaged. The watch was born with a white or creamish dial that has turned to this, in my opinion, quite beautiful, natural Havana brown. This happened most likely due to exposure to moisture years ago. And in many instances, exposure to moisture like that could be a disaster for a watch. It can cause case decay, it can cause a movement, total corrosion to the point of being beyond repair. Luckily, all of the changes that were made to this watch by the natural elements like moisture were totally repairable. The watch was totally overhauled and serviced back to its original UG manufacturer specifications. Anyway, if you know me, if you know Theo and Harris, if you know Anna, who wears a Polerouter very proudly every day, hers also has quite a bit of patina, you know that this watch is incredibly important in the collecting world of vintage watches, and I'm always looking for them. I'm always proud to stock them, and that's watch number one. Watch number two is another piece that I think is exceptional. The condition on this one is immaculate. This watch basically is right now as it was when it was released from Omega's factory in 1968. Just a little bit of background on the Seamaster and what makes it as a model line so cool. At its inception, the Seamaster was supposed to be, and was successfully, an all-purpose watch. The original tagline was for town, sea, and country, meaning it had to be refined enough to be suitable in a jacket at dinner. It had to be resistant to whatever disasters could happen at sea. And in the country, it had to be robust enough to be able to handle whatever work had to be done. And this example, like I said, which dates to 1968, is a wonderful example of that. It has all of these classic design elements that would make it refined, like this beautiful, big silver sunburst dial, stick hands, thin indices, and a smooth bezel, but its size, right under 38 millimeters, was big enough to almost kind of wear like a sports watch. we've paired this unpolished, oversized example with our beads of rice bracelet, and I think, frankly, it's one of the most beautiful watches in the T&H shop. And if you're talking about value, Seamasters rise to the top. When you're in the conversation of Seamasters, Seamaster Date 8 in this condition is the top of that category too. Last but certainly not least, we've got a Rolex here, a Reference 6424. It's a watch that on its surface is beautiful, there's no doubt. A big unobstructed silver dial, nice little almost arrowhead arrow markers, wide alpha hands. The whole configuration is non-luminous, which is a tactic that Rolex often used in their dress models. They kind of believed that a luminous watch, a watch with tritium in this case, is inherently sporty. So a watch like this, a more formal piece, shouldn't have that tritium. It's a tiny little nuance, but I think it's a beautiful piece of Rolex history. But what makes this particular example so much cooler than an average non-luminous Rolex model is its case. It was specially made for this particular low production model, the 6462. It's two things. One, oversized. Watches like this typically measured more conservatively at 34 millimeters. While I happen to love 34 millimeter watches, there's no debate as to what is more collectible, 36 or 34. 36 has a far more modern presence on the wrist, which is exactly what this has. Second, it's ultra thin. It's beautiful. It is. This is totally unusual for Rolex. Rolex is known much more for having beefier oyster cases, but this example, while still cased in a traditional Rolex Oyster, was totally slimmed down for the purpose of fitting right under the cuff perfectly. Again, this is not a watch that most people are going to see and notice for its nuance, but the subtlety of its dimensions here make a world of difference if you're someone that has a very particular eye specifically for vintage Rolex. And in the world of vintage Rolex, everyone knows rarity is king next to condition. And this watch, I mean, as far as condition, just look at it. It's mint. That's it, guys. These are 3 watches that are currently available in the Theo and Harris watch shop. If you have any questions about these or any other of the watches in the Theo and Harris watch shop, shoot me an email. I personally answer all of them. I'm here to answer all of your questions about years and about how something might fit in your lifestyle, shipping questions, anything. I'm here. I will see you all soon and speak to you via email.